The paper trembled in Ellie's hands. 1 month. That's all she had left. 1 month before the bank took her home, her land, everything her father had worked for. And then the knock came, the one that would change her life forever. Ellie Whitfield wiped her dusty hands on her apron and squinted at the setting sun. The fields were dry, the crops struggling. Another season without rain. Another season of praying, working, and falling further behind. Her father's cough echoed from inside the house. Was worse today. The doctor had said rest would help, but rest didn't pay debts. A loud thud at the door made her jump. Ellie yanked it open to find Mr. Harlow, the banker, smirking on her porch. His suit was too fancy for their small Nebraska town, and his smile was as fake as the gold watch on his wrist. "Miss Whitfield," he said, tipping his hat like he hadn't just come to ruin her life. "Time's up. Pay what you owe or the bank takes the farm." Her stomach twisted. "You know I don't have it." Harlow's grin widened. "Then I suggest you listen to Mr. Morrow's offer." Behind him, a tall, broad-shouldered man stepped forward. Thaddeus Morrow, the richest, meanest cattleman in the territory. His eyes were cold as winter. "Marry my nephew," he said, voice rough as gravel. "Do that and your debt disappears." Ellie's breath caught. "What?" "You heard me." Thaddeus tossed a folded paper onto the porch. "His name's Cole. He'll be here tomorrow. Be ready." Then he turned and left, leaving Ellie standing there, heart pounding. Marry a stranger? Never. But as she looked back at the house, at the shadow of her sick father in the window, she knew the truth. She had no choice. The man standing on her porch was nothing like she expected. Tall, with sharp green eyes and a quiet way of holding himself, like a storm waiting to break. This was no spoiled city boy. This was trouble. Ellie woke before dawn, her stomach in knots. Today she'd meet the man she had to marry. She scrubbed the kitchen floor, baked bread, and even tried to fix her father's old coat, anything to keep her hands busy. But nothing could stop the ticking clock in her head. Knock. Knock. Her heart jumped. She opened the door and froze. The man on her porch wasn't some fancy Easterner. He wore a simple brown coat, his boots dusty from travel. His face was serious, his jaw tight. And his eyes, sharp as a hawk's. "Ellie Whitfield?" he asked, voice low. She nodded. "I'm Cole Barrett." He didn't smile. "I guess you know why I'm here." Ellie's face burned. "You're here to marry me." A flicker of something crossed his face. Regret? Anger? But it was gone fast. "Let's get this done." The town preacher's house was small and smelled like old books. Ellie stood stiffly beside Cole, her hands clenched. "Do you, Eleanor, take this man?" "No," she screamed inside. But out loud she whispered, "I do." Cole's voice was rough. "I do." No kiss. No smiles. Just a piece of paper that made them husband and wife. As they stepped outside, the townsfolk whispered. Ellie kept her chin high, but her eyes stung. Cole leaned close, his breath warm on her ear. "Meet me behind the church in 10 minutes. We need to talk." Then he walked away, leaving her standing there, a bride with no wedding, no husband, and no idea what came next. This marriage isn't real. The words hit Ellie like a slap. But the truth? That was worse. Ellie found Cole in the shadows behind the church, his arms crossed. "What's going on?" she demanded. "Why did you agree to this?" Cole's voice was barely a whisper. "Because Thaddeus Morrow is a liar. And your father wasn't just sick, he was poisoned." Ellie's breath left her lungs. "What?" "Thaddeus wanted your land. Now he wants me to control you." Cole's eyes burned. "But I won't. This marriage is just paper. You're free." Ellie shook her head. "Free? I have nothing." "Then let me help you." Cole stepped closer. I can prove what Thaddeus did. But I need time. A cold wind blew between them. Ellie wanted to scream, to cry, but mostly she wanted revenge. Fine, she said. We'll pretend. But when this is over, I never want to see you again. Cole nodded. Deal. But as they walked back to town, side by side but miles apart, Ellie couldn't shake the feeling that this stranger knew more about her life than she did. And that scared her most of all. The floorboard creaked under Ellie's foot. A sound so small, but in the deadly silence of Thaddeus Morrow's study, it might as well have been a gunshot. Ellie pressed herself against the wall, her heart hammering so loud she was sure they'd hear it. The voices from inside the study grew clearer as she held her breath. The deed will be signed by week's end, Thaddeus growled. And if that stubborn girl causes trouble? A new voice cut in, one Ellie recognized as Harlow the banker. We handled her father. The daughter won't be a problem. Ellie's blood turned to ice. Handled her father. The words spun in her head as the truth crashed over her. They'd murdered him. A floorboard groaned behind her. Ellie whirled to find one of Thaddeus's ranch hands staring right at her, his eyes widening in recognition. Boss, he bellowed. She's here. Cole was brushing down his horse when the shouting started. That voice, high, furious, unmistakably Ellie's, sent him running before he'd even thought about it. He found her backed against the mercantile wall, three of Thaddeus's men circling her like wolves. One had her wrist in a crushing grip. Let go of my wife. The words left Cole's mouth before he could stop them. He hadn't meant to claim her like that, but the sight of Ellie in danger made something primal roar to life inside him. The biggest cowboy sneered. Or what, city boy? Cole moved faster than any of them expected. One sharp twist and the man was howling, his fingers bent at a sick angle. The other two lunged. Just as Ellie brought her knee up hard between the second man's legs. As the cowboys writhed on the ground, Cole grabbed Ellie's hand. Run. They didn't stop until they reached the edge of town, chest heaving. Ellie yanked her hand away. That was stupid, she panted. Now they'll know we're together? Cole finished. His mouth quirked. Good. Ellie blinked. What? Cole stepped closer, so near she could see the gold flecks in his green eyes. If we're going to survive this, Ellie Whitfield, we need to convince everyone, including Thaddeus, that I'm completely, desperately in love with my wife. Her breath hitched as his thumb brushed her cheek. Starting right now. The saloon doors swung open, and every head turned as Cole guided Ellie inside with a hand at the small of her back. His touch burned through her dress. Smile at me, he murmured against her ear, his breath warm. Like you can't wait to get me alone. Ellie's face flushed, but she forced a smile as he led her to the bar. The whole town was watching, including Thaddeus, who sat at his usual corner table with a calculating gleam in his eye. Cole's voice carried as he ordered 2 whiskeys. Nothing's too good for my beautiful bride. Ellie nearly choked on her drink when his hand settled possessively on her thigh under the bar. She shot him a glare, but he just grinned, that infuriating, handsome grin, then kissed her. Right there in front of God and everyone, Cole Barrett kissed his wife like a man starved. And the worst part? Ellie kissed him back. When they finally broke apart, the saloon erupted in cheers. All except Thaddeus, whose glass shattered in his clenched fist. The study smelled of leather and lies. Ellie's fingers trembled as they traced the embossed spine of Thaddeus Morrow's private ledger, the one she wasn't supposed to touch, let alone open. But the moment she saw it sitting unguarded on his desk, something primal had pulled her forward. Now, as she lifted the cover, the rustle of parchment echoed like a shout in the silent room. Golden afternoon light slanted through the velvet curtains, illuminating columns of numbers that made no sense, until they did. June 12th, $200 to Sheriff Dawson for Whitfield matter. Ellie's breath hitched. That was 3 days before her father took sick. She turned the page. June 15th, payment to J. Porter for special tonic. Delivery confirmed. The words blurred. Old Porter, the stooped apothecary who'd patted her hand at Papa's funeral, he'd been part of this? Her stomach rolled as she flipped faster, the truth unfolding like a poisoned flower. July 1st, deed transfer finalized. Harlow to begin foreclosure if girl refuses marriage. A floorboard creaked overhead. Ellie froze, heart hammering. Thaddeus was supposed to be at the cattle auction until sundown. But that was definitely footsteps, heavy, deliberate, moving toward the staircase. She slammed the ledger shut, but the clasp caught. Panic licked up her spine as the steps grew louder. With a desperate yank, she tore the entire clasp free, the metallic ping ringing like a gunshot. No time to hide it now. She shoved the book down her bodice just as the study door swung open. Thaddeus filled the doorway, his shadow stretching across the Persian rug. Sunlight glinted off the silver handle of his walking stick, the one rumor said he'd once broken a man's jaw with. Eleanor. His voice dripped honeyed venom. How unexpected. Ellie forced her chin up. Mrs. Morrow asked me to fetch her shawl. Did she? Thaddeus stepped closer, his polished boots crushing the fallen clasp. Funny. My wife's in Cheyenne. The air thickened. Ellie's pulse roared in her ears as his gaze dropped to her unnaturally stiff posture, the ledger's outline barely concealed beneath her corset. Turn out your pockets. I don't have. Now. When she didn't move, he lunged. Ellie twisted away, but his walking stick hooked her ankle. She crashed to the rug, the ledger skidding across the floor. Thaddeus scooped it up with a laugh that chilled her blood. Stealing from me? Your father at least died with dignity. He raised the stick. Just as the French doors burst open, Cole stood framed in sunlight, chest heaving like he'd run miles. His shirt was untucked, his hair wild, and in his hand. Ellie blinked. Was that a frying pan from the kitchen? Missed the auction, sir, Cole drawled, hefting the cast iron. Heard there was better sport here. For one suspended heartbeat, no one moved. Then Thaddeus's smile turned feral. You'll hang for this, Barrett? Both of you. Cole's gaze locked with Ellie's. In that split second, an entire conversation passed between them. Run. Together. As Thaddeus bellowed for help, Cole yanked Ellie up and shoved her toward the window. Go. I'll hold him. She scrambled onto the balcony, the ledger clutched to her chest. Behind her, a sickening thunk. Then Cole tumbling after her, his lips split and bleeding. Hold on tight, he growled, wrapping an arm around her waist as they slid down the trellis. The wood groaned under their weight, roses tearing at Ellie's skirts. They hit the ground running. Through the kitchen garden. Past the startled stable boys. Into the dense cottonwoods where the horses waited. Only when they galloped halfway to the river did Ellie dare look back. Thaddeus stood on the balcony, his face purple with rage. But in her arms, the ledger's secrets weighed heavier than any weapon. Cole's hand found hers on the reins. What did you find? Ellie swallowed hard. Proof. Enough to ruin him. The sun dipped below the horizon as they rode, painting the prairie in blood-red light. Somewhere ahead, a coyote howled. Or maybe it was the wind. Or maybe, just maybe, it was the sound of Thaddeus Morrow's empire beginning to crack. The first drops fell as they reached the abandoned line shack, fat and heavy as ripe plums bursting on parched earth. Ellie barely noticed the rain soaking through her dress, not when every nerve still screamed with the memory of Thaddeus's walking stick whistling toward her face, Not when Cole's blood dripped steadily onto their clasped hands as he helped her dismount. The old trapper's cabin leaned precariously into the wind, its cedar shingles curled like old parchment. Cole kicked the door open with a splintering crack, his breathing ragged. Inside. Now. Ellie stumbled over the threshold into musty darkness. The single room smelled of dried herbs and mouse droppings, the remnants of someone's hurried departure years ago. A tin cup still sat on the rough-hewn table, a moldy blanket draped over a stump chair. Cole barred the door with a length of firewood, his movements sharp with pain. Moonlight through the broken shutters striped his face, revealing the ugly gash across his cheekbone where Thaddeus's signet ring had caught him. "You're hurt," Ellie whispered. He wiped blood from his jaw with a torn sleeve. "Worth it." Thunder growled overhead as Ellie rummaged through the cabin's meager supplies. Her fingers closed around a half-empty bottle of whiskey behind a rusted biscuit tin. "This'll need cleaning." Cole hissed as she dabbed at his wound, the alcohol biting deep. Up close, she could count every one of his sun-bleached lashes, see the flecks of gold in his green eyes that no artist could properly capture. His breath hitched when her thumb accidentally brushed the corner of his mouth. A deafening crack of lightning made them both jump. The sudden white flash illuminated the ledger lying open on the table, and the damning words within. Ellie traced the entry with a shaking finger. "Payment to Judge Calloway for favorable ruling. That's the man who's supposed to try Thaddeus's case next month." Cole's hand closed over hers, stilling it. "We knew he owned half the territory." Outside, the storm howled like a living thing, rain hammering the roof like 1,000 tiny fists. "But this," he tapped the ledger, "this is the key. Every bribe. Every forged deed. Even the arsenic purchase." Another lightning flash. In its brief glare, Ellie saw the exact moment Cole noticed her torn bodice, the red mark blooming on her collarbone where Thaddeus had grabbed her. His jaw hardened. "I should have hit him harder." The raw violence in his voice startled her. This wasn't the careful lawyer or the performative husband. This was something wilder, something that made heat pool low in her belly. The storm redoubled its fury. A gust tore through the broken window, extinguishing their lone candle. In the sudden darkness, Ellie became acutely aware of Cole's body warmth mere inches away, of the way his calloused fingers still cradled her hand. Then, a sound that wasn't thunder. Dozens of them. Ellie's blood turned to ice. "They found us." Cole moved faster than she'd ever seen. In one fluid motion, he kicked dirt over the fireplace embers, snatched the ledger, and pulled Ellie toward the back wall. "There's a root cellar under that rug." The trapdoor opened with a groan of protest, revealing inky blackness below. Ellie hesitated. Just as a man's voice shouted outside, "Check the shack." Cole didn't ask. He lifted her bodily and lowered her into the darkness, following so close she felt his chest against her back. The trapdoor shut above them with a final sounding thud, plunging them into air so thick with the scent of earth and old potatoes that Ellie nearly gagged. Absolute blackness. Absolute silence but for their shared breaths. Then, the cabin door splintering open above them. Boots on floorboards. The crash of overturned furniture. Ellie bit her lip hard enough to taste copper. Cole's arms came around her in the dark, his mouth pressed to her ears so faintly she might have imagined it. Not a sound. Upstairs, glass shattered. Someone laughed. The ledger, hidden beneath Cole's shirt, seemed to burn against Ellie's spine where they touched. Minutes stretched like hours. Rain dripped through the floorboards above, landing cold on Ellie's upturned face like tears. Then, miraculously, the voices receded. A shouted order. More hoofbeats fading into the storm. Still they waited. When Cole finally exhaled, his breath stirred the hair at Ellie's temple. They're gone. Neither moved. Somewhere in the dark, their hands found each other. Fingers interlacing, palms pressing, an anchor in the suffocating blackness. Ellie didn't know who leaned in first. But when their foreheads touched in that secret underground dark, something between them shifted irrevocably. Not just allies. Not just pretend. Something far more dangerous. The morning sun painted the prairie in gold, but Ellie felt no warmth as she stood before the crowd gathered in Dustvale Square. The ledger, now smudged with dirt and Cole's blood, lay heavy in her hands. Across from her, Thaddeus Morrow smirked, surrounded by his hired men, as if the whole trial were nothing more than a poorly written play. The townspeople had come in droves, their faces a mix of curiosity and fear. Farmers whose lands had been stolen, shopkeepers who'd been strong-armed into unfair deals, even the old widow Hemsley, all stood silently waiting. Judge Calloway, a thin man with spectacles perched on his nose, adjusted his robes and cleared his throat. This hearing is now in session regarding the allegations against Thaddeus Morrow. Thaddeus laughed, cutting him off. Allegations? From a hysterical girl and a disgraced lawyer. His gaze locked onto Ellie, cold as a winter creek. You should have taken my deal when you had the chance. Cole stepped forward, his voice steady. Your deal was theft. And murder. He turned to the judge. The ledger proves it. Page after page of bribes, forged deeds, and payments to poison Eleanor Whitfield's father. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Thaddeus's smile didn't waver. A ledger anyone could have written. Where's your witness? Ellie's fingers tightened around the book. She had known this would come. Ledgers could be denied. Words on paper could be called lies. But then, I'll testify. The voice came from the back of the crowd. Heads turned as Josiah Porter, the old apothecary, shuffled forward. His hands trembled, but his voice was clear. I gave Jeremiah Whitfield that tonic. Thaddeus paid me too. The square erupted. Thaddeus's face darkened. You senile old fool. And I've got the receipt. Porter shouted back, louder than Ellie had ever heard him speak. He thrust a yellowed slip of paper into the air, with Thaddeus's seal on it. The crowd's murmurs turned to shouts. A woman gasped. A man cursed. Judge Calloway's gavel came down hard. Order. Order. But there was no order left. The dam had broken. One by one, others stepped forward. The blacksmith who'd been forced to sell his land for pennies. The young mother who'd watched her husband get beaten for refusing to leave his homestead. Even Sheriff Dawson, his face ashen, admitted, I looked the other way. He paid me too. Thaddeus's smirk finally cracked. He took a step back, then another, but the crowd had already closed in around him. Ellie didn't cheer. She didn't shout. She just stood there, breathing for what felt like the first time in years. Cole's hand found hers, his grip warm and sure. It's over. But as she looked at him, really looked, she saw the shadow still in his eyes. Because some things weren't so easily fixed. The farmhouse door creaked as Cole pushed it open, revealing the empty rooms beyond. His saddlebags were already packed, sitting by the hearth like a guilty secret. Morning light streamed through the windows, too bright, too cheerful for what today was. Ellie stood in the doorway, arms crossed against the chill she knew wasn't from the air. You're really leaving? Cole didn't look at her as he tightened the straps on his bag. Thaddeus is in prison. Your land's secure. You don't need me anymore. The words landed like stones. You think that's why I wanted you here? Her voice cracked. Because I needed you? Finally he turned. The morning light caught the scar on his cheek, the one Thaddeus had given him. The one he'd gotten for her. Ellie, this, he gestured between them. It started as a lie. A means to an end. And now, He hesitated. The silence stretched, thin and fragile. Outside, a meadowlark sang. The scent of wildflowers drifted through the open window. Cole exhaled long and slow. Now I'm just the man who failed his sister the same way I failed you. Ellie stepped forward, her boots loud on the wooden floor. You didn't fail me. I couldn't protect you from Thaddeus. You had to save yourself. His jaw tightened. Just like Clara couldn't? He broke off, turning away. The name hung between them. Clara. His sister. The one he'd mentioned only once in the dark of the barn, when the storm had made confessions feel safe. Ellie reached for him, her fingers brushing his sleeve. Look at me. When he didn't, she grabbed his arm, forcing him around. You listened to me, Cole Barrett. You didn't fail Clara. And you didn't fail me. Her voice dropped to a whisper. You fought for me. His breath hitched. Somewhere outside, the wind chimes her father had hung years ago tinkled softly. Ellie swallowed hard. Stay. Just one word. But it held everything. The fear, the hope, the unspoken thing that had grown between them in root cellars and courtrooms and the quiet spaces before dawn. Cole's hand came up, hovering near her face like he wanted to touch her but didn't dare. What if I'm not the man you think I am? Then prove me wrong. For one heartbeat, too, the world held its breath. Then Cole kissed her. Not like he had in the saloon for show. Not like in the barn when fear and adrenaline had made them reckless. This was slow. Sweet. A promise. When they finally broke apart, his forehead rested against hers. I'll stay, he murmured. On one condition. Anything. Marry me. For real this time. Ellie laughed, the sound bright as the morning around them. Took you long enough to ask. And as the sun rose higher over the prairie, warming the land they'd fought so hard to keep, Cole's saddlebags remained by the hearth. Unneeded. Unpacked. Home. The barn smelled of fresh hay and hope. Lanterns swung from the rafters, casting dancing light over the gathered faces. Faces that had once looked at Ellie with pity, now alight with joy. Her fingers trembled as she adjusted the wildflower crown in her hair. This time the vows would be real. The fiddle player struck up a lively tune as Ellie walked down the makeshift aisle between rows of grinning neighbors. Mrs. O'Leary had sewn her dress from spare muslin, the fabric soft against her skin. At the front, Cole stood stiff in a borrowed suit, his eyes dark with emotion as she approached. Reverend Tilly beamed. We've already witnessed these two say I do once under unusual circumstances. Laughter rippled through the crowd. But today we celebrate a love that refused to be denied. Cole's calloused hands enveloped Ellie's as he repeated his vows, his voice rough. I promise to stand by you in every storm, literal or otherwise. The crowd chuckled, remembering the night they'd spent trapped in the line shack. Ellie's answering smile faltered as movement caught her eye, a shadowed figure lingering by the barn doors. A man in a dusty black coat, watching with unsettling intensity. Cole followed her gaze, his grip tightening. Don't look. But it was too late. The stranger tipped his hat, revealing the jagged scar running from eyebrow to jaw, before melting into the night. The celebration continued, but Ellie's skin prickled. That scar, she'd seen it before. In Cole's nightmares. Blood dripped onto the porch steps, dark red against weathered wood. The man collapsed at Ellie's feet just as thunder cracked overhead, his breath coming in wet, ragged gasps. He's coming, the stranger choked out. Then his eyes rolled back and the storm broke in earnest. Cole dragged the unconscious man inside as lightning lit the kitchen in stark flashes. Ellie pressed a towel to the gunshot wound. Note, change from original outline. Let me know if you'd prefer another injury. Who is he? Jonah Cade. Cole's voice was hollow. My brother. The admission hung between them like a live wire. Outside, wind howled through the cottonwoods. Inside, the only sound was Jonah's labored breathing and the steady drip-drip of blood on floorboards. Ellie wrung out a cloth. "You told me your family was gone." "I lied." Cole's hands shook as he peeled back Jonah's coat, revealing a wanted poster sewn into the lining, Jonah's face staring back with a $500 bounty beneath it. "He rode with the Devil's Fork gang. I thought he was dead." Jonah's eyes fluttered open, glassy with pain. "Wish I was little brother." His bloody fingers clutched Cole's wrist. "They're coming for you. For what you know about a cough racked his body. The Silver Junction job." Cole went pale. Ellie had never seen true fear on his face before. Not like this. The front door burst open. Not from wind. From a boot. Rain lashed the windows as the intruder stepped inside, a man with ice-blue eyes and a silver-starred badge glinting on his chest. "Well now," Marshal Denton drawled, shaking water from his hat. "Ain't this cozy?" Ellie stood frozen, the damp cloth still pressed to Jonah's wound. Everything about this felt wrong. The marshal's smirk, the way his men fanned out through the house without invitation, the too casual hand resting on his pistol. Cole positioned himself between Ellie and the lawman. "You've got no jurisdiction here, Denton." "Funny thing about that." Denton tossed a folded paper on the table. The governor's seal gleamed in the lamplight. "Seems I've been authorized to bring in Jonah Cade, and anyone harboring him." His gaze slid to Ellie's midsection, where her hand had instinctively come to rest. Even pregnant wives of disbarred lawyers. A cold realization dawned. This wasn't about Jonah. It never had been. Cole's voice dropped to a whisper only Ellie could hear. "The root cellar. Now." But before she could move, Jonah groaned from the cot. Silver Junction wasn't just a robbery. Blood bubbled at his lips as he struggled up. It was a... Denton's pistol flashed. The blast drowned Jonah's last words as he toppled backward, dead before he hit the floor. In the ringing silence, Ellie's knees gave out. Cole caught her, his arms the only solid thing in a world gone mad. Above them, Denton calmly reloaded. "Pity. Now we'll have to do this the hard way." The kitchen window shattered. A rock tumbled across the floor, trailing a scrap of paper. Denton's men drew weapons as Cole snatched it up, his eyes scanning the hastily scrawled message. "Posse coming. 20 men. Thaddeus leading." Ellie's blood ran cold. Thaddeus Morrow was supposed to be rotting in prison. Denton smiled like a wolf scenting blood. "Looks like we'll all get what we deserve tonight." Outside, the first torches flickered to life in the rain. "Continue but remove guns entirely, change injuries." The lantern light flickered wildly as the wind howled through the shattered window. Ellie pressed both hands against Jonah's bleeding side, the coppery scent of blood thick in the air. Outside, torchlight danced closer through the sheets of rain, Thaddeus's men coming for revenge. Cole barred the door with the heavy oak table, his face grim in the uneven light. "Denton," he spat, turning to the so-called marshal. "You sold your badge to cover up Thaddeus's crimes." Denton smirked, rolling up his sleeves to reveal thick forearms crisscrossed with scars. "And you're still the same fool who thought the law could beat money." He nodded to his men who began overturning furniture, searching. "Where's the Silver Junction ledger, Barrett?" Ellie gasped as understanding dawned. "That's what this is about? More stolen land deeds." Jonah coughed weakly on the cot, his face ashen. "Not land." He gripped Cole's arm with surprising strength. "Tell her, little brother. Before it's too late." Cole knelt beside Ellie, his voice low and urgent. 3 years ago, I took a case defending homesteaders against a railroad baron. What I didn't know." He swallowed hard. Thaddeus and Denton were investors. When I found proof they'd diverted river water to sabotage farms, they had me disbarred. Jonah tried to expose them. A thunderous crash interrupted as the front door splintered. Through the broken wood, Ellie saw Thaddeus himself, his face twisted with rage, leading a dozen men with pitchforks and axes. Denton's smile turned vicious. "Seems we have common enemies tonight, Barrett." Pain lanced through Ellie's abdomen so suddenly she doubled over. "Not now, not like this." The baby couldn't come now with death pounding at their door. She clutched the kitchen table as another contraction seized her, biting her lip to keep from crying out. Cole was at her side instantly. "Ellie?" His eyes widened in realization. "We need to barricade the root cellar," she panted. "They'll never—" A scream tore from her throat as her waters broke, splashing across the floorboards. Denton's men froze at the sound. Even Thaddeus's mob outside hesitated. Jonah struggled upright on the cot, clutching his bleeding side. "Go," he rasped to Cole. "I'll hold them off." Before Cole could protest, his brother grabbed the fireplace poker with surprising strength. "Should have stood with you years ago." The back door burst open. Old Man Porter stood there, rain streaming off his hat, a dozen homesteaders at his back armed with scythes and hay hooks. "Heard you needed neighbors," the apothecary said simply. Another contraction racked Ellie's body. Cole swept her into his arms as the house erupted into chaos. Denton's men brawling with Thaddeus's mob, farmers tackling lawmen, Jonah swinging his makeshift weapon with wild abandon. As Cole carried her toward the cellar stairs, Ellie glimpsed Thaddeus raising a rusted axe over Jonah's unprotected back. Just as Josiah Porter brought his medicine bag down on Thaddeus's head with a sickening crunch. The last thing she saw before darkness swallowed them was Denton fleeing into the storm, and Thaddeus lying motionless in the mud. Sunrise painted the ravaged homestead in pale gold when Ellie awoke propped against flour sacks in the root cellar, a swaddled bundle in her arms. Cole knelt beside her, his face streaked with dirt and tears, gently stroking their daughter's cheek. "She's perfect," he whispered. Footsteps creaked on the stairs. Josiah Porter descended, his spectacles cracked, his shirt sleeve torn. "It's over," he said quietly. "Thaddeus is alive, but he'll hang." Denton's men turned on him. "He's in custody." His eyes flicked to Jonah's still form in the corner, covered by a blanket. "I'm sorry about your brother." Cole's throat worked. "He died protecting family." Ellie touched the tiny fist peeking from the blankets. "What do we name her?" Cole's smile was the most beautiful thing she'd ever seen. "Clara," he said without hesitation. "After the sister I couldn't save, and the brother who taught me redemption comes late but never too late." Upstairs, the sound of hammers began, neighbors already repairing the damaged house. The scent of fresh bread and coffee drifted down. Life continuing. As baby Clara stirred in her arms, Ellie knew the greatest battles were behind them. The frontier might be wild, but love, real, stubborn, hard-won love, was the only force truly capable of taming it. If your heart raced as Ellie and Cole fought for their love against all odds, don't miss their next adventure. Like this story if you rooted for their happy ending. Subscribe for more epic Western romances full of grit, passion, and unforgettable twists.